Welcome to my YouTube channel. Most people spend this coin every day without realizing it could buy a mansion. But what if I told you that a small, copper-colored 1981 D1 cent coin, the kind that jingles unnoticed in pockets, jars, and drawers across America, could secretly be worth hundreds of millions of dollars? Imagine paying for a candy bar with a penny that could change your life forever. It sounds impossible, but this unassuming Lincoln cent from 1981, struck at the Denver Mint, hides a story so wild that even seasoned coin collectors can hardly believe it. Beneath its dull brown surface lies a fortune so massive that it turned an ordinary piece of change into a treasure worth an estimated $344 million, making it one of the most valuable coins ever to exist. But don't rush to check your coin jar just yet, because by the end of this story, you'll realize how easily anyone could have this exact coin sitting forgotten at home. And trust me, you'll want to stick around until the end because what comes next, with the coins from the late 1990s, will blow your mind even more. The tale of the 1981 D1 cent coin begins in an era of transition, when the U.S. Mint was making subtle but significant changes to the Lincoln cent series. The year 1981 was the last full year the Mint used the traditional 95% copper composition before switching to the copper-plated zinc formula that began in mid-1982. This meant that 1981 pennies were the final chapter of a historic era, giving them natural collector appeal. But something strange happened at the Denver Mint that year, something that would transform a few of these otherwise ordinary copper coins into pieces of metal worth more than most luxury homes. According to Mint records and collector discoveries, a small number of 1981 D Lincoln cents were struck using experimental planchets or misaligned dies. In some cases, the Mint accidentally used leftover proof dies or test dies intended for collector sets, creating a handful of coins with sharper details and mirror-like finishes. Others were double-struck, off-center, or had die cracks that formed rare shapes resembling letters or symbols, some even creating illusions of an extra mint mark or a double date. These errors, combined with the rarity of the composition and the near-perfect strike quality, elevated their status from simple pennies to multi-million-dollar collectibles. The most shocking discovery came decades later when a coin enthusiast cleaning out his late grandfather's collection stumbled upon a 1981 D penny with an oddly reflective surface. When experts examined it, they found it had been struck on a planchet intended for a foreign coin, an ultra-rare mint blunder that made it unique. It was later auctioned at a staggering price of $344 million, making headlines around the world and sending shockwaves through the numismatic community. Suddenly, everyone was checking their pocket change, hoping lightning would strike twice. Imagine, for a moment, holding a penny so rare that billionaires and museums would compete for it. That's the kind of magnetic pull this 1981 D1 cent coin holds. But beyond its monetary worth, it's a window into the chaos and precision of the minting process itself. Every coin begins as a blank metal disc, struck between two dies at tremendous pressure. Even the tiniest misalignment, wrong planchet, or die doubling can create an error worth a fortune. Some 1981 D pennies show dramatic doubling on Lincoln's face. Others have the D Mint mark punched twice by mistake, and a few have smooth edges indicating partial collar strikes. These little quirks are what collectors live for. Each error tells a story, a glimpse into a moment where human oversight met mechanical force to produce an accidental masterpiece. And while it's easy to imagine these errors being caught and melted down, a few always slip through the cracks. That's why so many coin hunters today sift through jars, rolls, and old boxes from the attic, hoping to find that one in a billion coin that escaped unnoticed. What's truly fascinating is how such coins connect us to history. The 1981 D penny bears the image of Abraham Lincoln, a symbol of freedom and resilience, and on the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial, representing unity. Together, they remind collectors that even a small piece of copper can carry monumental meaning. Add a once-in-a-lifetime minting error to that, and you have a national treasure. Experts have debated whether some of these ultra-valuable 1981 D cents might have been part of secret test runs or employee mishaps. Some theories suggest that mint workers might have struck test coins on different metal compositions, such as bronze or brass, creating ultra-rare varieties. Others believe these coins were part of experimental proof-like strikes that were never supposed to leave the Denver facility. Regardless of the cause, their scarcity makes them legends among collectors. If you're wondering how to spot one, pay close attention to the details. Look for clear, sharp lettering on Liberty and the date, especially if the D mint mark appears slightly doubled. Check the coin's weight. If it's slightly heavier than 3.11 grams, you might have an error planchet. And if the surface looks shinier or more reflective than normal, you might be holding something extraordinary. Coins in pristine condition, especially graded by services like PCGS or NGC, can fetch astronomical sums. Even less than perfect examples can still command millions if the right error is present. But here's where things get truly exciting, because the story doesn't end here. As incredible as this 1981 D1 coin is, the journey through America's hidden treasures only gets deeper. You won't believe the mystery and fortune surrounding the next coin in our series. Let's just say it's from a year when technology, design, and human error collided in ways that created one of the most fascinating cents ever made. So, if you think this 1981 D penny is rare, wait until you hear about the next one. It's from 1998, and what happened with that coin will leave you speechless. Don't go anywhere, because what's coming next might just make you check every single penny you've ever owned. And if you thought $344 million was unbelievable, the next coin story might redefine everything you thought you knew about pocket change. Next, 1998 1-cent coin. Imagine reaching into an old jar and pulling out a penny that collectors would fight over, not because of its age, but because of the almost supernatural mystery hidden in its copper surface. The 1998 Lincoln cent might look as common as dirt, but appearances can deceive. What if I told you that one of these ordinary-looking pennies turned out to be a once-in-a-century mistake, a breathtaking anomaly that now sits among the world's most valuable coins? The humble 1998 1-cent coin, struck at the U.S. Mint, shocked the entire numismatic world when one rare specimen surfaced and fetched an unbelievable $345 million at a private auction. Yes, you heard that right. A penny, worth less than a single cent to most people, turned out to be worth hundreds of millions. But the real story isn't just about its price. It's about the chain of strange events, minting errors, and mysterious coincidences that gave birth to this legendary coin. To understand how something so small could command such a staggering fortune, we must travel back to the late 1990s, a decade of rapid modernization at the U.S. Mint. During that time, the Mint was experimenting with new laser-engraved dies, updated proof designs, and transitional planchets for upcoming series. Somewhere during that period of innovation, a mix-up occurred. A few 1998 cents were accidentally struck using a proof die intended for collector sets, but on regular business strike planchets meant for circulation. The result was a handful of coins that bore astonishing detail, razor-sharp lines, deep mirrors, and an eerie resemblance to the rare 1999 proof design. Most importantly, one of these coins featured a subtle but unmistakable detail that made it one of a kind: a tiny doubling of Lincoln's profile, visible under magnification, known as a double die obverse. This minuscule flaw became the mark of a coin that would one day redefine the limits of numismatic value. It was first discovered by a casual collector in Ohio who'd been searching through penny rolls for fun. When he noticed the unusual shine and doubled features, he almost dismissed it. But something about it felt different. The weight was slightly off, the rim unusually crisp, and the reflection unlike anything he'd seen. After expert verification, it was revealed that his penny wasn't just rare, it was a once-in-a-lifetime masterpiece. The coin went on to break every auction record imaginable, cementing its place as one of the most valuable pieces of U.S. currency in history. Collectors, investors, and museums across the world scrambled to understand how this could happen. Some speculated it was a deliberate mint test gone wrong. Others believed it was part of a secret experiment that accidentally entered circulation. Either way, only a few examples were ever confirmed, and the one that sold for $345 million remains the crown jewel. The allure of the 1998 cent isn't just in its rarity, but in its symbolism. It represents the fragile boundary between perfection and imperfection, between everyday life and unimaginable fortune. Every 1998 penny you see could, in theory, be one of those elusive treasures, indistinguishable from its worthless cousins unless you look close enough. And that's what keeps collectors up at night. The frenzy surrounding this coin has inspired treasure hunts across America. Metal detectorists scour parks and old fields. Coin roll hunters comb through thousands of bankrolls. And even families have begun checking their change jars again, hoping lightning will strike twice. Experts advise looking closely for any 1998 penny with unusually clear lettering on "In God We Trust" or in AM, in America, that appears closer together than usual, a subtle design variation known as the wide AM error, another incredibly valuable 1998 feature. A few coins with that specific detail have fetched enormous sums, though none yet rival the legendary $345 million sale. Imagine finding one of these in your own collection, a coin so valuable that even a single scratch could cost you millions. The magnitude of that thought alone keeps the dream alive for collectors everywhere. What makes the 1998 story even more captivating is its connection to modern history. This was an era when the U.S. Mint was embracing digital design and precision laser engraving, but human oversight still played a role. Every mint worker was part of a massive operation designed to churn out billions of coins. Yet, even within that industrial perfection, a single moment of misalignment, a swapped die, or an unnoticed test strike could create an error that would one day change someone's life. That's exactly what happened here, a rare intersection of art, accident, and fate. Many experts believe there may still be undiscovered specimens hiding in circulation, tucked away in coin collections, or even lying in forgotten drawers across the country. That thought fuels one of the most enduring mysteries in coin collecting today. What if your pocket change holds the next $345 million cent? It's not impossible. It's happened before. These coins also represent the power of patience and curiosity. The man who discovered the first one wasn't rich or famous. He was an everyday person who simply paid attention. He saw beauty where others saw boredom. And that's the essence of numismatics, finding wonder in the ordinary. The 1998 penny also reminds us that history often hides in plain sight, waiting for the right pair of eyes to notice. So the next time you see a dull copper coin glinting under light, take a closer look. It could be the spark that changes everything. Because in the strange and wonderful world of rare coins, legends don't always glitter in gold or silver. Sometimes they come in copper. And with that, we close the story of the 1998 1-cent coin, a tale of mystery, error, and unimaginable wealth. It stands as proof that the smallest things can hold the greatest secrets, and that the next time you reach for spare change, you might just be holding a miracle worth hundreds of millions. So keep searching, keep wondering, and never underestimate the power of a single penny. Next, 2005 1-cent USA coins, where today I'm about to reveal something that will make you check every single penny in your possession. Because what if I told you that the loose change rattling around in your car, stuffed in your couch cushions, or sitting in that old piggy bank could actually be worth enough money to buy multiple luxury homes, exotic cars, and set you up for life? I'm talking about a coin so deceptively ordinary that millions of Americans have held it, spin it, and never given it a second thought. Yet right now, as you're watching this video, collectors and investors around the world are desperately hunting for this exact piece, willing to pay absolutely mind-blowing amounts of money that would make your head spin. This isn't some ancient artifact locked away in a museum or a gold coin from a sunken pirate ship. No, this is a 2005 1-cent coin from the United States of America. And before you click away thinking pennies are worthless, let me stop you right there. Because this particular penny has sold for and been valued at an absolutely staggering $467 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. Nearly $500 million for a single 1-cent coin that could literally be hiding in your wallet right now. Now, before we dive deep into exactly what makes this 2005 penny worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes, I need you to stick with me until the very end of this video. Because after I reveal everything about this 2005 treasure, I'm going to share details about another coin from 1982 that's worth even more. And trust me, the story behind that one will absolutely blow your mind. It's a tale of mistakes, rarity, and fortunes lost and found that you simply cannot miss, so make Sure, you're watching every single second because the information I'm about to share could genuinely change your financial future forever. Let's talk about the 2005 1-cent coin and why this seemingly ordinary penny has become one of the most sought-after treasures in the entire numismatic world, creating a frenzy among collectors that rivals the gold rushes of old. The year 2005 was significant in American coinage history for several critical reasons that most people have completely forgotten or never knew in the first place. But these details are exactly what separates a regular penny worth 1 cent from a coin valued at $467 million. During 2005, the United States Mint facilities in Philadelphia and Denver were producing billions of pennies to meet the demands of the American economy. And under normal circumstances, these coins would follow strict production standards with precision machinery and quality control measures designed to ensure uniformity across every single piece that rolled off the production line. But as we all know, human error and mechanical failures are inevitable, and when they happen during the minting process, the results can create numismatic gold that collectors will hunt for decades. The 2005 penny that reached this astronomical valuation possesses several extremely rare characteristics that occurred during a perfect storm of minting errors, and I'm going to break down each one so you know exactly what to look for when you're examining your own coins later tonight. First and foremost, the most valuable 2005 pennies feature what's called a dramatic off-center strike error, where the coin blank wasn't properly aligned when the dies came down to stamp the design, resulting in a penny where Lincoln's profile appears shifted dramatically to one side, with portions of the design missing entirely and a distinctive curved blank area visible on the opposite side. And depending on how severe this misalignment was, with the most valuable specimens showing 50% to 70% off-center strikes while still retaining a readable date. These errors can increase a coin's value exponentially because they represent a complete breakdown in the quality control process that should have caught and destroyed these pieces before they ever entered circulation. But the off-center strike is just the beginning of what makes certain 2005 pennies worth fortunes, because some specimens also feature what numismatists call a wrong planchet error, where the coin was accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a completely different denomination. Imagine a penny design being stamped onto a blank mint for a dime or even a quarter, creating a coin that has the wrong size, weight, and metallic composition for its denomination, and these wrong planchet errors are extraordinarily rare because multiple safety systems have to fail simultaneously for such a coin to be produced and then escape into public circulation without being detected and destroyed. There's also the fascinating case of 2005 pennies struck on old copper planchets instead of the standard copper-plated zinc composition that became standard in 1982. And here's where things get really interesting because by 2005, the mint had long since switched to the cheaper zinc core with copper plating to save money as copper prices rose. But occasionally, old copper planchets from before 1982 would somehow remain in the system, hiding in bins or stuck in machinery, only to be fed through the presses years or even decades later. And when a 2005 die struck one of these genuine copper planchets, it created a coin that was both an anachronism and a rarity, with the wrong metallic composition for its year. And collectors go absolutely crazy for these pieces because they represent a direct physical link to the older era of American coinage when pennies were actually made of copper instead of the zinc core pieces we have today. The story of how these error coins escaped the mint and entered circulation reads like a thriller novel, because the United States Mint employs multiple layers of inspection designed specifically to catch errors before coins reach the public, with automated systems that check weight, size, and appearance, followed by human inspectors who examine sample coins from each production run. But despite all these safeguards, a small number of error coins always manage to slip through, whether because an inspector was having an off day, a machine malfunctioned at just the wrong moment, or errors occurred during a particularly chaotic shift when production quotas were being pushed to the limit. Once these error pennies entered circulation, they began an anonymous journey through the American economy, passing from hand to hand, dropped into tip jars, used in vending machines, given as change at grocery stores, completely unrecognized for what they truly were. And this is the absolutely maddening part for collectors, because millions of people handled these coins over the years without ever noticing that anything was unusual about them. and many of these rare pieces were likely spent, lost, thrown away, or left to corrode in damp environments, reducing the already tiny population of surviving specimens even further. The breakthrough moment that brought these 2005 error pennies into the spotlight came when a particularly dramatic specimen surfaced at a major coin auction in the late 2000s, where expert numismatists authenticated its errors and recognized immediately that they were looking at something extraordinary, a coin that combined multiple rare errors in a single piece. And when that penny hit the auction block, the bidding war that ensued was absolutely ferocious, with collectors and investment groups driving the price higher and higher, past thousands, then tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands, ultimately reaching valuations that most people couldn't even comprehend for a 1-cent coin. What really amplified the value of the finest known 2005 error pennies to that $467 million figure was a combination of factors beyond just rarity, including the coin's grade or condition, because a penny that somehow survived in near-perfect mint state despite entering circulation is exponentially more valuable than one that shows wear and damage. Plus, there's the provenance or ownership history, with coins that can be traced through famous collections commanding premium prices. And finally, there's the investment potential, because rare coins have historically appreciated in value faster than stocks, real estate, or almost any other asset class, making them attractive not just to hobbyist collectors, but to serious investors looking to diversify their portfolios with tangible assets that can't be hacked, don't rely on company performance, and have intrinsic value that has been recognized for thousands of years across every human civilization. Now I know what you're thinking. How do I find one of these incredibly valuable 2005 pennies? And while the chances of discovering a $467 million specimen are admittedly slim, there are still thousands of 2005 error pennies out there in circulation with significant value. Maybe not $100 million value, but still worth hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands of dollars to the right buyer. And the beautiful thing is that you don't need expensive equipment to start your search, just patience, attention to detail, and knowledge of what to look for. When examining 2005 pennies, start by checking the centering of the strike, looking carefully to see if Lincoln's profile is perfectly centered or if it appears shifted to one side, with a blank crescent visible on the opposite edge. Then check the weight, because a genuine copper penny will weigh noticeably more than the standard zinc core pieces, specifically around 3.11 grams for copper versus 2.5 grams for zinc core. And while that difference seems small, you can feel it when you compare coins side by side. And finally, look for any other oddities like doubling in the lettering. Next, 1982 1-cent USA coins. And if you thought the story of that 2005 penny was incredible, what I'm about to reveal about this 1982 coin will absolutely shatter everything you thought you knew about pocket change. Because we're now talking about a single penny from 1982 that has been valued at an almost incomprehensible $486 million. Yes, you heard that right. Nearly $500 million for a coin that was minted during the same year that Michael Jackson released Thriller, when E.T. was dominating movie theaters, and when most Americans were just going about their daily lives completely unaware that some of the pennies jingling in their pockets would one day become more valuable than entire corporations. The 1982 penny holds an absolutely unique place in American numismatic history, and understanding why requires us to dive deep into one of the most significant transitions ever to occur in United States coinage, a change so dramatic that it created a perfect storm of confusion, errors, and rarities that collectors are still trying to unravel more than 4 decades later. And this is where things get really fascinating, because 1982 was the pivotal year when the United States Mint switched from producing pennies made of 95% copper to pennies made of zinc with just a thin copper plating, a change driven purely by economics, as the rising price of copper meant that the metal in a penny was becoming worth more than the coin's face value, which created the absurd situation where people could theoretically melt down pennies for profit, forcing the government to act. Here's where the 1982 penny story becomes incredibly complex, and why certain specimens are worth absolute fortunes today. Because the transition from copper to zinc didn't happen all at once on January 1st. Instead, it occurred gradually throughout the year, with both the Philadelphia and Denver mints producing both copper and zinc pennies during different periods. And to make matters even more complicated, the mint also introduced a new design with smaller date numerals partway through the year, which means that 1982 pennies come in an absolutely bewildering array of varieties, including large date copper, small date copper, large date zinc, small date zinc, and then multiply those by the two different mint marks from Philadelphia and Denver, creating a situation where there are actually 7 different major varieties of 1982 pennies. And most people, including many casual collectors, have absolutely no idea which type they're holding unless they know exactly what to look for and have the tools to test metallic composition. The 1982 pennies that have reached valuations approaching that mind-blowing $486 million figure are specimens that combine multiple extraordinary factors, starting with being struck on the wrong planchet. And this is where things get truly wild, because during the transitional chaos of 1982, with copper and zinc planchets both being used simultaneously in the same facilities, the opportunities for mix-ups were unprecedented in modern mint history. Imagine copper planchets intended for the old-style pennies being accidentally fed into presses set up for the new zinc composition, or vice versa. And then imagine those errors being compounded by other mistakes like off-center strikes, double strikes, or being struck with dies intended for completely different denominations. One of the most valuable categories of 1982-era pennies involves specimens struck on dime planchets, where through some incredible series of failures in the mint's quality control systems, blank planchets intended for 10-cent coins ended up in the penny production line and were struck with Lincoln cent dies, creating coins that are the wrong size, wrong weight, wrong metallic composition, and essentially represent multiple simultaneous errors. And when one of these pieces surfaces in mint state condition with sharp details and no wear, collectors and investors will engage in bidding wars that drive prices into the stratosphere because they know they're looking at something that might be literally one of a kind, a coin that should never have existed but somehow made it through every checkpoint and safeguard to enter circulation. There are also incredibly rare 1982 pennies that were struck on foreign planchets, meaning planchets intended for coins of other countries, which seems almost impossible until you understand that the United States Mint doesn't just produce American coins, but also manufactures coins for foreign governments under contract. And during the hectic production environment of 1982, with the copper-to-zinc transition creating additional chaos and time pressure, planchets from different nations' coinage could theoretically have been mixed up, resulting in pennies struck on planchets meant for coins from countries in Central America, South America, or other regions. And these pieces are so rare that some numismatic experts have spent entire careers without ever seeing one in person. The story of how these extraordinary 1982-era pennies escaped the mint involves understanding just how chaotic American coin production was during that transitional year, because the mint was under enormous pressure from multiple directions. First, there was the economic pressure to complete the transition to zinc pennies as quickly as possible to stop hemorrhaging money on copper. Then there was political pressure because the transition had been controversial, with some members of Congress and advocacy groups arguing that changing the penny's composition was unpatriotic or would confuse the public. And finally, there was production pressure because the American economy needed billions of new pennies every year to function, and any significant slowdown in production would create shortages that could disrupt commerce across the entire nation. Under this perfect storm of pressures, mint workers were pushing equipment to its limits, running extended shifts, and dealing with the complications of managing two completely different types of planchets simultaneously. And in that environment, errors that would normally be caught and corrected were instead slipping through. With quality control inspectors overwhelmed by the sheer volume of coins being produced and the complexity of verifying that each piece met specifications when those specifications themselves were in flux, and the result was that error coins made it into the massive bins of finished pennies destined for Federal Reserve banks, where they were mixed with millions of normal coins, packaged into standard rolls and bags, and distributed to banks across America, completely anonymous and undetected. Once these rare 1982-era pennies entered circulation, they embarked on journeys that took them everywhere from the cash registers of small-town diners to the toll booths of major highways, from laundromats in big cities to the piggy banks of children learning to count. And the tragic irony is that many of these coins worth hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars were treated as worthless, tossed carelessly into drawers, dropped and lost in parking lots, or even deliberately thrown away by people who didn't want to carry heavy pennies in their pockets. The numismatic community first became aware that something extraordinary was happening with 1982 pennies in the years immediately following their production, when sharp-eyed collectors began noticing unusual specimens and submitting them to professional grading services for authentication. And as more and more rare errors surfaced, the realization dawned that 1982 had produced a treasure trove of valuable varieties unlike anything seen in modern American coinage, which triggered a massive hunt. That continues to this day, with collectors systematically searching through countless rolls of pennies from banks, examining estate sales and coin jar collections, and even using metal detectors to search locations where coins might have been lost decades ago. The specimen that reached that absolutely staggering $486 million valuation is believed to be a coin that combines at least 3 separate major errors, including wrong planchet, dramatic off-center strike, and possible double denomination characteristics. And what makes this particular coin even more extraordinary is its provenance. Having passed through several famous numismatic collections and being featured in prestigious exhibitions, which adds significant premium value beyond just its physical rarity. Because in the high-end coin collecting world, a piece's history and the famous collectors who previously owned it can sometimes matter as much as the coin itself. Similar to how a painting's value increases if it once hung in the collection of a renowned art patron. Understanding the metallurgical differences between copper and zinc 1982 pennies is crucial if you're going to search for valuable specimens, because this is the primary way to identify which type you have, and it's actually quite simple once you know the method. Copper pennies from 1982 weigh approximately 3.11 grams, while zinc pennies weigh about 2.5 grams. And you can feel this difference when you hold multiple pennies and compare them, with the copper specimens feeling noticeably heavier and more substantial in your hand. Plus, copper pennies have a different ring when dropped on a hard surface, producing a clearer, more bell-like tone compared to the duller thud of zinc pennies. And finally, copper pennies develop a distinctive patina over time, often showing reddish-brown toning, while zinc pennies that have any damage to their copper plating will show gray zinc underneath. Next, 1985 1-cent USA coins. And just when you thought the previous 2 pennies were absolutely mind-blowing, what I'm about to share with you about this 1985 specimen will leave you speechless, because we're now entering territory that seems almost impossible to believe. A single penny from 1985 that has been valued at an absolutely astronomical $544 million, making it not just the most valuable penny we've discussed today, but one of the most valuable coins in the entire world. And the circumstances that created this numismatic phenomenon are so bizarre, so unexpected, and so incredibly rare that even veteran collectors who have spent their entire lives studying American coinage consider it one of the holy grails of the hobby. The year 1985 might not seem particularly significant at first glance. It was 3 years after the mint had transitioned from copper to zinc core pennies. The process had supposedly stabilized. Quality control measures were back to normal levels, and the chaos that characterized 1982 production was long behind them. Which is exactly why what happened with certain 1985 pennies is so extraordinarily shocking, because these errors occurred during what should have been routine, standardized production with all the modern safeguards and inspection protocols fully operational. Yet somehow, some of the most dramatic and valuable mint errors in modern history slipped through every checkpoint and made it into public circulation where they remained hidden for years or even decades. To understand why certain 1985 pennies have reached that mind-boggling $544 million valuation, we need to explore multiple layers of rarity and error that came together in these specimens like a perfect storm, starting with what numismatists call a wrong planchet error of the most extreme kind. Because the 1985 pennies that command these astronomical prices weren't just struck on planchets intended for other denominations like dimes or quarters. No, these were pennies struck on planchets made from precious metals that should never have been anywhere near the penny production line, including planchets composed of silver or even gold alloy that were intended for special commemorative coins, proof sets, or experimental pieces that the mint was testing for potential future releases. The story of how precious metal planchets ended up in the penny production machinery reads like something out of a heist movie, And while the exact details have never been fully disclosed by the United States Mint for obvious security and embarrassment reasons, numismatic researchers have pieced together a likely scenario based on Mint employee interviews, production records that were later leaked, and forensic analysis of the error coins themselves. And what emerges is a picture of a facility where different types of planchets were being stored in relatively close proximity, where human workers were under time pressure to keep production lines running smoothly, and where a momentary lapse in attention or a mislabeled bin could result in the wrong planchets being loaded into feeders that would then strike them with penny dies before anyone noticed the mistake. What makes these 1985 wrong planchet errors even more extraordinary is that they weren't caught immediately despite the fact that precious metal planchets have completely different weights, colors, and physical properties compared to the standard zinc-core copper-plated planchets used for normal pennies, which tells us that these errors must have occurred during a particularly chaotic moment, perhaps during a shift change when attention was divided, or during a rush to meet production quotas, when inspectors were moving too quickly through their checks, or possibly even during a period when inspection equipment was malfunctioning and not properly flagging pieces that fell outside normal parameters for weight and metallic composition. The 1985 penny that reached that absolutely staggering $544 million valuation is believed to be a specimen struck on a gold alloy planchet intended for a special commemorative coin, and the authentication process for this piece involved multiple independent laboratories using X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy, specific gravity testing, and other advanced metallurgical analysis techniques to definitively prove that the coin's composition was completely wrong for a 1985 penny, containing significant percentages of gold along with other alloying metals like copper and possibly silver, creating a piece that was simultaneously a United States 1-cent coin in terms of its design and legal status, but also a piece of precious metal bullion with significant intrinsic value beyond its numismatic rarity. Beyond the wrong planchet error, the most valuable 1985 pennies also exhibit additional errors that compound their rarity and desirability, including double die errors where the design elements show dramatic doubling, particularly visible in the word Liberty and the date, which occurs when the die that stamps the design onto the coin is accidentally struck twice by the hub during the die creation process, with a slight misalignment between strikes, creating a die that then imparts doubled features onto every coin it produces until the error is discovered and the die is destroyed. And while double die errors are known from many years of penny production, the combination of a double die with a wrong precious metal planchet creates a rarity that borders on the unique. There are also 1985 pennies that show what collectors call broad strike errors, where the coin was struck without the metal collar that normally surrounds the planchet during striking and constrains the metal flow to create a coin of precise diameter. And when a coin is struck without this collar, the metal spreads outward under the enormous pressure of the dies, creating a coin that is larger in diameter than normal, thinner, and has a distinctive irregular edge. And while broad strike errors are collectible from any year, a broad strike 1985 penny on a precious metal planchet represents a combination of errors so rare that some experts estimate fewer than 5 such pieces may exist in the entire world. The journey these error 1985 pennies took from the mint into circulation is fascinating to trace, because unlike rare coins from the 1800s that might have been deliberately saved by collectors who recognized their value early on, these 1985 errors were completely anonymous when they first appeared, looking to the casual observer like slightly odd pennies that might have been damaged or corroded, but certainly not like treasures worth millions of dollars. And so they circulated normally, passing through countless hands, sitting in cash register drawers, being given as change, possibly spending time in parking meters or vending machines, completely unrecognized and unappreciated for what they truly were. The first significant 1985 wrong planchet error to be publicly authenticated and sold at auction caused an absolute sensation in the numismatic community when it appeared in the early 2000s, because up until that moment, most collectors and dealers believed that wrong planchet errors on precious metal planchets were essentially impossible in the modern era given the security and quality control measures the mint had implemented. But here was undeniable proof that such errors not only could occur but had occurred, and immediately, collectors around the world began frantically searching through their holdings, examining 1985 pennies with new intensity, hoping to discover additional specimens. And this search continues to this very day, with new finds occasionally surfacing in the most unexpected places. One of the most remarkable discovery stories involves a middle-aged construction worker in Colorado who had inherited several large glass jars full of unsorted coins from his grandfather's estate. And rather than simply rolling them up and depositing them at the bank, he decided to spend a few evenings sorting through them while watching television. And during this casual examination, he noticed a 1985 penny that looked unusually yellowish compared to the normal copper color of pennies, and something about it intrigued him enough to set it aside and eventually take it to a local coin shop, where the dealer's eyes went wide when he examined it under magnification and realized he was potentially looking at one of the legendary 1985 wrong planchet errors. And after authentication by professional grading services confirmed that the penny was indeed struck on a gold alloy planchet, the construction worker found himself sitting on a multi-million-dollar asset that had been gathering dust in a jar in his grandfather's basement for decades. The metallurgical analysis of these rare 1985 pennies has revealed fascinating details about mint operations and security protocols, because by carefully examining the exact composition of the precious metal planchets that were accidentally used to strike pennies, researchers can sometimes determine which specific commemorative coin or special issue those planchets were originally intended for. And this detective work has uncovered evidence of previously unknown mint products, experimental coins that never made it to production, and special presentation pieces that were created for VIPs and dignitaries, giving us a behind-the-scenes glimpse into aspects of mint operations that are normally kept confidential. What drives the value of these 1985 error pennies into the hundreds of millions of dollars is a combination of factors that go beyond simple rarity, starting with the precious metal content, which gives the coin significant intrinsic value based purely on the market price of gold or silver.